Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Hey, what's up, Blazer fans? Welcome to the Blazers Edge podcast, part of the Almighty Baller Radio Network. I'm Tara Bowen-Biggs, here with Dan Meringue, and we've got one more joining us tonight. We wanted to talk about big men this evening, so we've invited Blazers Edge reigning big man, D1 player from California, Long Beach. He played 8 years professionally in Europe. He retired back to the Northwest and now writes for Blazers Edge, checking in at 6'10", the tallest person I know. Welcome to the show, Brian Freeman.
Hey, you guys. If I can, I don't know what I'm going to be able to offer on this podcast, but I can definitely offer height. So I got that going.
We have height in spades.
Well,
spades, plenty.
Well, glad to have you tonight because the Blazer big men are a pretty big topic. The latest games the Blazers have been playing, especially Jusuf Nurkic, has been on everybody's mind. So we are going to go. I guess we should probably just jump right into that. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, I think that sounds like the right place to start. There's plenty of things that weren't good in the Brooklyn game that we'll eventually get around to. Maybe, I don't know. We'll just kind of see where it goes here. But
let's recap the Brooklyn game.
You want to do that? Just get it out of the way. Just so we can burn the game tape. Brian, quick takeaways from the Brooklyn game aside from the big man.
Man, I mean, the number one thought I had is they've been talking forever about defense being their motive this year, defense being their energy. But when the offense went down, that's when the team really started to crumble. You could see their spirits drop, and they definitely get their energy from their offense. Despite all the talk of defense kind of being their MO here.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because that's the familiar waters for them. So that's when that well goes dry. Wow, that's two water metaphors. God, that's awful. When that well goes dry, you can kind of see it. Like you said, their spirits tend to crumble. That's the foundation this team has been built on. This isn't a team that's like the Memphis Grizzlies, where if things aren't going well, they can lock you down for a few possessions. Oh, excuse me, I had to mute the mic while I sneezed. But they can't draw from that. They need to draw the inspiration and the swagger and the mentality and the attitude from draining 4 straight threes and not locking you down for 4 straight possessions.
Now, I feel like this year, okay, so they had that first game that throws their statistical,
baseline sideways.
It makes it a little sideways. But even with that, how many years have we been saying we just would love to see the Trailblazers be playing average defense? I feel like they're playing average defense right now. I feel like their defense is still better than last year, and I feel like they've got more to fall back on this year than they did last year. Because I totally agree with y'all that they're motivated from their offense. Their offense is their bread and butter, but offense is the thing that they've always been able to do. And when they can't play offense, it sends them into a tizzy. But I feel like this year they at least have some fundamental things that they can do right on defense to help them tread water, at least before they get their offense back. Do you all think that it's fool's gold saying that they're better on defense this year, or do you think that they have actually improved at least so far through the 12 games we've seen?
I would say they've definitely improved. I mean, you can see that it's been more of a goal, more of a point of emphasis on the players, even when they talk kind of after the games, when they break down their thoughts and how they played. Defense even gets mentioned a lot more. So clearly, it's something that's been talked about. It's in the back of their mind. So it's something that they're trying to make it more of an effort. So yeah, I think I wouldn't say it's fool's gold, but right now we're still in kind of the working parts of making that part of their identity. And I think it's been trending in the right direction. But after last last couple games, especially yesterday when they started melting down and their offense went down. You can feel they're just not there. Maybe it's not cemented in them, but they're trending in the right direction.
Brian, I'm curious, when you're watching them, do you feel like it's their team defense or their individual defense that they struggle with most when they're struggling?
Definitely team defense. I mean, every team defense begins and ends with communication. And, you know, I was just going through the tapes and dissecting the game yesterday, and it was just miscommunication after miscommunication, left wide open guys, left guys wide open all over the court. And, you know, the effort's there. You can see some pointing. Tara, I know you love pointing.
I do. I love pointing.
I saw some good pointing. You know, I saw some pointing that, you know, shows that, once again, that they're trying to do the right things, but just so many team breakdowns, so many miscommunications, just leads to even more easy baskets than the individual breakdowns are allowing.
It's kind of funny though. Like, I just want to roll this one back a little bit. Like when you first started talking about this, like the idea was that it was okay for the Blazers to start talking about defense. It's like George Carlin's 7-letter word that you don't say around Portland. Like defense is just like it's one of those things. It's like it's okay to start talking about it. It's kind of a weird transition because it's been such a just complete dumpster fire for the past 3 years that it's something that I don't know. It went from taboo to like, okay, you know, maybe they're doing something now, and I would absolutely agree that they're playing better. They've elevated the bar, and yeah, while Phoenix has skewed things quite a bit as far as the baseline statistics and the advanced numbers are concerned, and there have been some stinkers in the past couple games. Obviously, the Brooklyn one's not really going to skew anything because it's not like they dropped 130. That's the thing. In all of these games that have been close, so that they've lost, so they've miscued, or they've played just junk defense for stretches, it hasn't been an entire game or even an entire quarter. Like they haven't just gone completely sideways yet, which is
except for against Toronto.
Okay, yeah. And even then, Toronto struggled.
Scored 99.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto still struggled. Like, it wasn't like a game where Toronto dropped 130 on Portland. That's what I mean. Like, there's certainly something different about the effort being put forward on that end of the floor. But there's so many other things that are going on right now, and I kind of want to bring it back to it because it's something I think we need to get to, and that's particularly like what has been going on or what has gone on the end of the last two games. And that is Jusuf Nurkic not being out on the floor. Now,
yeah, let's talk about that.
The baseline that I kind of want to establish here, at least from my point of view, is if you're going to call Jusuf Nurkic part of your big three, you ride and die with him. If a team goes small, you punish them to death by keeping him out there and going big. If you lose the trade-off on the other end, so be it. But you don't talk about how he's going to be that guy. You don't have C.J. McCollum and Damian Lillard say he's the guy that's going to carry us and then have him sit. That's probably the only criticism I'm going to have of Terry Stotts in this entire discussion, because that part I didn't agree with, the idea of sitting him. The possibility that he may have been sat in both those instances for lack of effort, I think that's a real discussion point. Like overall, Brian, what's your take from both the game plan perspective here and the overall idea that it may be effort-based and this may be kind of a teaching moment?
I think you hit it right on the head. You know, defense has been thrown around as a reason why he hasn't been on the court. But, I mean, let's be honest. C.J. McCollum and Damian Lillard are always on the court. You know, It's not all about defense is not the only reason why Nurkic isn't playing. There's something else. It may be lack of effort. Maybe it's attitude. It's one of those things that, you know, the coach sees things that we don't get to see. The coach is part of conversations that we don't get to hear. We may look at a play, like I was doing the breakdown of their game today. And I look at, you know, I see what I can see. I see the court. I see what I think they're trying to do. And I say, oh, Nurkic did it right. But we don't know if Stotts is in the background telling Nurkic to do something completely different that he's doing. And he's just not listening, or he's not we just don't know that part of that part of the game. Which
a perfect play that we could both sit here and look at, and we could discuss a million different ways. Was Spencer Dinwiddie getting that straight line drive off what was supposed to be a pick and roll, I guess, right down the middle for the dunk. Yeah, where the screen never reached Lillard, and Nurkic went to the high side and went with the pop man. And Lillard just stood there flat-footed without ever actually getting screened. Was Lillard supposed to push to the sideline and anticipate Nurkic sinking? Or was Nurkic in the right in taking away the pop man, and Lillard was supposed to stay tighter and go under the screen and force Dinwiddie to take the shot? We don't know that. But on the surface, that entire sequence just looks awful for both guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you have these game plans, you make this play, if this happens, yada, we want to do this, if this happens, but you can't do that for every situation. So there's just in those kind of unique instances where something happens that is kind of out of the realm of what you guys have talked about. That's where communication just becomes so important. On that play that you're just describing right there, if Nurk's yelling no screen, right after the screen's not set, Dame's going to act completely different. Or if Nurk's saying, sees where Dame is and sees Dame's kind of in a tough spot, then Nurk's can be yelling switch, or Dame can do the same thing, vice versa. But if you look at them, neither one of them does any sort of reaction, any sort of get ahead of the play, trying to figure it out. There's just no aggression towards figuring out, as both of them just kind of standing there with complete confusion all over their faces, and Dinwiddie just goes in for that wide open lane.
Yeah, and the crazy thing was it wasn't just if you watch that play, yeah, those two stand out. But if you watch every other guy on the floor, it's the same kind of reaction: flat-footed, no communication. I believe it's Evan Turner who turns his back on the ball. He's completely running away from the play with his back to the ball. Harkless is on the weak side corner, and he doesn't sink in at all. He just kind of stands there and watches the drive. It's the entire unit. Like, nobody's on a string, nobody's communicating. How does a team go from being not the most vocal team in the world, but being more vocal than they'd ever been, to just completely lackadaisical in not only the execution and effort, but communication as well?
Here's one thing that I worry a little bit about with, the rise of the immediacy of like social media and being able to watch replays instantly and all that stuff, is that we end up focusing on, one or two just really, really poorly executed plays that really represent, poor effort or just really demonstrate it. And I'm wondering, for how much of the game do you think a play like that represented the team's attitude for the whole game, or are we just looking at it happened at critical times when it shouldn't have happened? I mean, do you think that was representative of their attitude the entire game? Because Brian, I saw that you pulled together a lot of really nice highlights where you did show them doing things correctly in the first half, but then plays like this break down.
But see, when people talk about a good defensive team or a good defensive player, it's not somebody that, locked down a drive one time, or together they had a really good unit and made good defensive stop together. That's not what good defensive teams. That doesn't necessarily make a good defensive team or a good defensive player. To be a good defensive player or a good defensive team, it's about consistency. It's about doing it over and over and over and over again. That's what makes you a good team. You can make a great stop, but if the other times you're giving up buckets, and that doesn't mean you're a good unit. So it's all about perspective. It's all about consistency. And you mentioned right now we have all this social media and being able to dive into a certain play and make a big deal about it. I mean, I was in college before kind of that social media boom. Not to age myself a little bit, but even in high school, I mean, coaches are watching tape. We're watching film together, and if we have a play like that, that coach is sitting there pointing that play out and going over it over and over again. So it might not be maybe it wasn't the media that was hearing it all, but from a player's point of view, I mean, I've heard that, for as long as I can remember, since I started doing video breakdowns. It's like one bad play that bad.
That's going to lead off the tape meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's
that 22-2 run, when they sit down to do tape, that's where the tape's going to start.
Absolutely. And you know what? It'll probably be in that cut maybe 3 or 4 times, and it'll be a slow motion. It'll go in reverse. They'll have different people circled. I mean,
and nobody will say anything. It's one of those things where you just take it. You know it's coming, and you deal with it. And the thing was, you were spot on there, Tara, with the idea of the first half and the second half. And it was 2 totally different teams, at least for me, as far as how they were competing on both ends of the floor. The first half, they felt like they had kind of control of the game. Defensively, while it wasn't spectacular, I think that they got a little bit too comfortable solely because the Nets weren't hitting shots. There were, I think they take 30-something threes? 20, or is it 20-something threes? I think it was 24, 25 threes in the first half.
That's a lot of wide open threes.
There were miscommunications and issues repeatedly in the second half of the second quarter where I saw Dame get completely flat-footed on a closeout. Like he didn't know he was supposed to switch, or he didn't want to switch, or something got confused, and wide open three-point shooters on the left wing in particular. That if they hit a higher percentage of shots, which you would normally expect. I mean, this isn't a team that's a great three-point shooting team, but they're a good three-point shooting team. If they're hitting their looks, if they get hot, we're talking about Portland being down significantly at the half. Like, they had a ton of really, really good looks. And I'm sitting there, doing my halftime notes going, this game could be radically different if the Nets had a hot shooting night. And you can say that about any night, really, but the quality of shots they were getting were much better than what the scoreboard reflected. And I think that permeated the third quarter, that they thought that they could just continue to go out there and not have issues and not have problems. And then all of a sudden, they could turn it on or figure it out. Well, when that offense doesn't get rolling and then the Nets start hitting shots and then your defense starts to fall apart, that's how you get on the wrong end of a 22-2 run.
Yeah, that's exactly that mixed with your offense just hitting a lull as well. And I think that was a big part of it too. They weren't able to score the ball, weren't able to get the energy, and the defense got worse. Mm-hmm. You said left a lot of shots over the first half. I mean, the second half was just.
Oh, the second half was atrocious. From the start of the second half to the end whistle. The second half defense was. No, it was the worst I've seen this year. I had to think about it for a second, that for just taking a snapshot time period of the entire defense up and down the roster. It was bad.
Okay, let's drill into a little bit more, specifically, about what it was where they were falling short in that second half, and especially, was it the big men or was it a whole team thing? What was going on? Because, I want to know what happened there.
I mean, I always hate to say, well, the big men played well and the guards defensively. The big men played well defensively and the guards didn't play well, because they feed off each other a lot, especially for a team like Brooklyn that just runs a lot of drive and kick, high pick and rolls. I mean, if there's a pick and roll and the big man plays it perfectly and the guard doesn't, then it's probably an easy shot in a bucket, and vice versa. So in order to be able to really make an effort on a team like Brooklyn that drives and kicks so much, and I think that pretty much falls on everybody. And I mean, watching that game tape, there was nobody that stood out as playing really good defense. I mean, Napier made a lot of mistakes. Turner made some mistakes. Nurk made mistakes. Ed Davis, the guy who came in for him because Nurk wasn't playing defense, but apparently he made some mistakes. Dame and CJ made their mistakes.
They were compounding mistakes too.
What's that?
They were compounding mistakes. Like, one guy would make a mistake and then they would compound it by doing something just ridiculous. There were a couple of possessions where, it's slam the notepad down. Like, what are you doing? Like, you just took what was a difficult shot and gave them instead an easy three or a layup. I was like, guys, just don't double down on stupidity here.
Yeah, I had one time Napier, who was it? I think it was AC got the ball, tried to drive Nurk. Nurk played good enough defenses, kept the guy in front of him. Napier just has guarding the guy in the corner, just sprints to the middle of the key to try to steal the ball. AC sees him, just gets the ball and throws it right to, and just a wide open three. Just kind of one of those things. Like, what was the game plan there?
Yeah, what was the thought process? I mean, if you're going to gamble, if you're going to push on that, typically the scouting report, particularly in a guy like AC, is if you're going to put that pressure on him, you're going to put it on him on the first dribble, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're going to gamble, you're going to make him make the mistake early so you can recover, as opposed to on a static defense.
And one of my biggest pet peeves on defense is when you have a guy who's playing the one-on-one and he contains, he holds the drive, and somebody comes and helps him when he doesn't need any kind of help. So then you've pretty much just ruined the guy's good one-on-one defense. The guy made a stop. He did his job. The other players, their job is to make the passes hard, be in the lanes, whatever. If he can handle him one-on-one, then the defense from the players off the ball becomes much easier.
Yeah, the defensive integrity gets that much thicker.
Right. It's just not being part of a unit. This guy, Nurkic did his job. He held the drive. If Napier stays out there, then who knows? AC probably has to put up a bad shot. But because Napier, broke whatever their defensive scheme was, left his guy wide open. It's just things like that. And I just use that as an example, not to call out Napier, but kind of, because that was kind of a big one.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Those mistakes were compounding. You were already struggling as a unit defensively, and now you're going to take risks or force plays that aren't there and making it even more difficult for the team as a whole. And that's not the kind of position that they're in. They don't have the personnel to make up for those kind of possessions. They don't have the defensive stalwart superstars that can make those plays regularly, that can take those gambles. They don't have the Kawhis, they don't have the Giannis's, the Tony Allens, the guys that are going to suffocate somebody, and that their defense is so overwhelming on every possession that if they take a gamble and they make a mistake, it's worth the risk-reward ratio, because more than likely, in the long run, they're going to come out ahead. Napier's a guy, like, while I admire that, and I think he's one of the guys that if given enough time could be a guy like that. Portland is so bereft of that they play so safe that something like that stands out. It's in stark contrast to the entire team scheme.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, just piggyback on that a little bit. You mentioned a guy like Kawhi and Giannis. They're so long, they can get back and recover, and they're in defenses that kind of allow them to do that, to roam a little bit. As you just said, the Blazers do not have a defense that allows for one person to completely leave their guard. There's nobody else ready to make up for that and to cover two people for a moment and get their back up. There's absolutely nothing in place to make that to put him in a place where he feels he can do that.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this: you're talking some about the personnel on some of these other teams, like Kawhi, guys who are like that. The Blazers have actually had some changes to their personnel in that over the last handful of games. They haven't had Aminu and they have had Vonleh. How do these personnel changes affect the defense that the Blazers have been playing, do you think?
I mean, I would just look at the results. I mean, Aminu's exactly the type of guy that they're missing right now. Vonleh just hasn't really made that much of an impact. You wouldn't say he's playing bad. You wouldn't say he's doing great.
He's doing Vonleh things. He's there.
Still just kind of, but he's shooting 38% from the field, playing 18 minutes a game. He's getting his 5 rebounds, but he's not really making much of a difference. You look at a guy like Aminu. I mean, Aminu's been great.
He was having a career year.
Yeah, having a career year, and who knows if he can sustain shooting 43%. But regardless, that's what he was doing for the beginning of the year. To lose that, I mean, that's huge. That's a massive, massive loss.
I think it was a function of Aminu's injury more so than anything that, basically Vonleh came in and Aminu went out. What do you think might happen once Aminu is ready to play? And we also have Meyers Leonard ready to come back into the rotation. How do you all think that's going to affect, again, specifically like the defense?
Here's my whole take on the personnel that Portland has and how they use them and how it could all go out going forward. Aminu is hands down their best defender. When he's not out there, that's issues for them within the starting lineup. Vonleh's a guy who I think he is who he is at this point in time. I don't think he's a real positive. I don't think he's a real negative. I think he's done some really nice things that I've called out on Twitter quite a few times actually over the past few games since his return. but I don't think he's ever going to be I think he's going to be a neutral kind of player. Like I said, he's not a real positive, he's not a real negative, but he's not going to hurt you. But he'll make some plays, and I don't think he's ever really going to hurt you. That's nice to have on a team. That's a nice luxury. But I think you need more of what Aminu gives you structurally, defensively, and what he's been giving offensively and on the backboards. It's been phenomenal. I know I'll get plenty of people going crazy about this, but I actually like Meyers out there defensively for two reasons. One, he's a massive body that eats up a ton of space. He does the turf shots in the paint. Two, he talks. He talks more than anybody on this team defensively. He talks, directs, and leads from the paint better than anybody else Portland has. He has all the skills necessary to be a good defender. Whether or not it ever actually comes together or not, that's another question. But I think that part of his game does lead to good things for Portland. And I'm not talking about we're going to see that for 20 minutes a night or anything like that. It's a few minutes. But I think those kind of habits, I think having him probably out there in practice helps. And he obviously hasn't been there, but neither him nor Aminu have been there in practice for the past, 2 weeks now? Week? So that could be part of it as well. So those guys return, Meyers coming back, the sooner Aminu gets back. Obviously, those are all good things for the team. As far as how things are going to shake out, I don't think Meyers is going to get a ton of minutes, but I think his attitude and his mindset might help. I don't know if it's contagious or not, but I think those things are probably a good thing for Portland in the long run. I mean, how are you looking at that, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, you said an interesting thing that as soon as you said it, I kind of started thinking is getting Meyers back on the practice squad. Meyers is his, I don't need to dive into what Meyers is. I think we all kind of know what Meyers is, but he is an effort guy, and that's, that little jump in effort that can, maybe have an effect in practice, and who knows, maybe it'll carry over to a couple minutes a game, but that is infectious. One guy when you're in a practice and you notice someone is going harder than you, I mean, every person in the world that's a competitor will see that and it'll trigger a switch. So if everybody's kind of going about the same speed, then that doesn't really happen. But, I could see Meyers being somebody that in practice kind of kicks it up another gear. Maybe he's yelling and he's kind of going crazy or whatever. Maybe one of those guys who makes stupid hard fouls and, fouls that are too hard for practice. Maybe he is kind of that guy. I don't know. I've never watched him practice, but kind of comes across that way a little bit. And, maybe something like that would be nice to have in a practice squad.
I saw it pop up in the comments the other day. I want to kind of break, since we're talking about big man and defense here, we're kind of we drifted away from the Nurkic topic as a whole, but I saw something in the comments the other day that was like, wow, are we really at this point already? With everything that's going around Nurkic, not talking to the reporters in the post game, and whether or not him being sat was an issue of effort. Somebody said that, are we at the time where we're going to have the closed door meeting, like the players only meeting? The way the attitudes, or the way that the guys were talking, and the attitudes that were there, both in the post game and in the media coverage today. This is Sunday. It didn't seem like it got that bad, but the quotes that kind of came out of practice from the media there, they kind of screamed like they were handwritten. Like, everything's fine, everything's cool. Coach Stotts is the best, greatest ever. He's my favorite coach. Nothing to see here. And we saw the effort from other folks talking about how Nurkic was still openly cheering his teammates from the bench. Like, there was at least the optics. It appeared that damage control was underway. Is that a fair assumption, Tara, Brian? Is that kind of how you guys are looking at this too?
Brian, I'm curious if you've ever been in a closed door meeting.
Yes, I was the captain and called quite a few closed-door meetings, actually. I've even when coaches weren't allowed closed-door meetings. And, sometimes they really work. And sometimes it's nice to, be able to look at somebody in kind of a safe environment, be like, I don't think you're doing your job. And they can explain, they're in front of your, the little family. They can explain themselves. And, and it makes a difference. People get mad. You get some arguments. But I've had some go really, really well, too, where – that practice was in a practice after kind of having these talks and people getting called out a little bit, it became the best practice of the year for the next 3 or 4 practices. And then, you feel a difference in the game. Whether it turns into wins isn't always true, but you feel a difference. People are trying harder and people hearing from it. So I'm a huge fan of closed door meetings. if nothing else, it's a call that things need to change. And when you kind of get that feeling as a player that, okay, things need to change, I need to, address myself. I need to kind of figure out what I'm doing, assess how I've been playing, assess what I can do better, and try to change. And you get that mentality that can often spark some positive along.
I'm a fan of the closed door meeting because it usually is a catalyst for something. It means things have gotten to a point where something needs to change. And I like how you said it naturally. I don't even know if you noticed that you said it, but you talked about sitting and talking in front of your family. And, that's what it's like. It's like, okay, let's gather around. We need to talk and we need to address this. I have this sort of other theory that, and I always have wild theories that are not based in much reality, but I'm always trying to figure out reasons for what's going on. And I think one thing that's going on this season is these huge homestands at the beginning of the season aren't allowing that bonding time that you get when you go on all those, on a bunch of road trips, because pretty much you go to practice, you show up, you do your thing, and then you go home. Does it have any, can you guys see anything based in reality about that? Or is that just like, no, that has nothing to do with any of this?
I mean, it could, but to me, it feels like more about the fact that even though they said it a million times that they had to get off to a good start, they knew that their schedule was relatively cushy to start. And I think they may, especially with the way that they started the season, with the defense looking so good, they may have been feeling themselves a little bit too much. And then they got gut checked by Milwaukee and Los Angeles.
Milwaukee and Los Angeles are like, they're not bad teams.
No, but that's the thing is like for the way that they were talking, this is just the players. This is kind of like the way that the franchise here was talking, was that, they expect to win the vast majority of games at home. And Milwaukee could end up being a fantastic team. The Clippers could end up being a fantastic team. But if you want to be that team that's in that 5-6 level as opposed to those teams that's in the 7 through 11 or 12 level, those are the games that you not only should win, but you should expect to win. So I think that those, as a competitor, and I'm sure Brian can attest to this on a professional level, none of these guys, regardless of who they're playing, are going in there thinking, oh, this is going to be a tough game tonight. We may lose this. They're going in with the swagger of, hey, we're going to drop 120, we're going to lock them down, and we're going to win this game. Like that's the mentality that all these guys, I mean, to get to this level, that's the mentality you have to have. I think there's probably something to the idea of being on a long homestand and being comfortable. And I think part of that plays into the idea of the easy schedule. They've played the fourth easiest schedule so far in their 500. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. Like those are like, well, I see a lot of people in the comment sections all over the place and on various websites and forums and boards and all of the like. I don't think it's not even, I don't think it's not freak out time, but there's certainly cause for concern because we're seeing a lot of the same things kind of rear their ugly head as far as how Portland is playing right now. Is the defense still an issue? Yeah, you could say it is. Is sloppy play and kind of becoming reliant on Dame and CJ? Yeah, we've heard these things before. The lack of consistent bench contribution, and then you toss in, again, from what it looks like on the outside, is a mini reenactment of the situation that Denver had with Nurkic here in Portland. Yeah, I mean, none of this stuff should be surprising. That's the thing. Is like, if everything goes right, if everything goes according to plan, sure, Portland could easily be 10-2 right now, 9-3. But that's not how everything goes. That's never how everything goes, especially if you're a Portland. Especially if you're a Portland fan. That's like if you're sitting here as a Portland fan and you're thinking everything's going well, you probably haven't been a Portland fan for that long. Either that or you're just crazy because nothing ever goes according to plan.
So just for reference, okay, sorry, did you want to finish?
No, I was just saying, like, none of this stuff is really that surprising at this point in time. So I would say that people that are freaking out and calling for Terry Stotts' job, slow your roll. Like, I know that's crazy to hear from me, that Captain Pessimist, but like none of the stuff is surprising. Like, can they fix some things? Yeah, they can shore up things in the paint. They can play better defense, but the idea that things are going to go sideways all season long.
You have to accept that things are going to go sideways.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Is like this team is still fundamentally flawed from a roster composition point of view. So, that's my one rant for today's podcast. Just slow down. Well, there's certainly cause for concern. I think there's more to this Nurkic situation that they're letting on to, and I would say that that's to me a bigger issue than the way Portland has lost these games, because I think that issue in and of itself is kind of leading to some of the other problems. I would say that
Can
the
you
other stuff.
elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by you think that there is an issue?
I think that much like Nurkic in Denver, he may have gotten a little too big for his britches, and he may be getting a little bit too comfortable. Now, the thing is, I think he may realize that. So I think he's doing a little bit of damage control. Do I blame him for not sitting down for the interview? And even if it wasn't that issue and it was his back, I think if you're in Nurkic's position, I think you have to realize that in the position you're in, with the history you have to be kind of careful with that. And I know that sounds kind of messed up, but I honestly feel that he has to be careful with optics. This is a guy, when he came here in the trade deal, he put on like the biggest PR bonanza I've ever seen from a new player who nobody really knew. Like, nobody in Portland really knew who he was, and then a week later, it's Bosnian Beast and Nurkic fever. Like, it was a barnstorming political tour. It was insane, like how he was everywhere all the time. So I think he may have gotten a little bit too comfortable by building up so much cachet early, and feels like he's on. And here's the thing, and Brian, you can attest this too. The level of player, there's certain level of requirements. Dame's allowed to take possessions off. He's the captain. He's the star. He's the superstar. He's the offensive engine. Nurkic may be allowed to take a play or two off, but he's not allowed the ratio that Damian Lillard is.
Yeah.
And I think that may be why he hasn't been out there. Because if you look at, I was looking at this. Well, you can probably, anybody else wants to pull this up. If you want to look at something from the Nets game, look at Nurkic was only a +3. Look at the trend line for the score in the game. When Nurkic was on the floor, Portland was trending in the positive. When he leaves the game, all of a sudden the Nets take control of the game again. And this theme happens throughout the game. So even though it was difficult for the Blazers to keep up with the small ball, the Nets couldn't keep up with Nurkic. And he was easily their most effective weapon on the offensive end. And I think he may have gotten the sense that, hey, I'm unstoppable and I'm really rolling on that end, so I need to go ahead and make sure I'm really focusing on that end. And defensively, we're playing okay, so I can kind of sit back a little bit and I can relax. And Coach Vanderpool apparently got off the bench and scolded him a couple times.
Brian, I'd be curious what you observed about Nurkic in that last quarter.
And
if you think this is an issue.
Well, I'm going to kind of going back a little bit to one thing Dan was saying. I'm definitely, one of my favorite quotes from a coach for a coach is the worst two things you can do in a season is to overreact and to underreact. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we're looking at here. Blazers lost to the Clippers on a last-second three, went to overtime with the Jazz, missed the buzzer beater against the Grizzlies, barely lost in Milwaukee in a game they probably should have won. I mean, they're right there. And so yeah, maybe there's something to tweak, but to overthrow everything and to, make some sort of mass hall change your philosophy thing is probably overdoing it as well. As far as Nurkic, he comes out the game yesterday, and first couple offensive possessions, you see him crashing the boards, you see him setting good screens. Throughout the game, you see him pointing. They're doing switches really well. In the first half, pretty much every time Nurkic switched on to Russell. That worked out well for the Blazers. It was kind of cool to see. He was down in a stance. Nurkic looked invested. He looked very invested into the game. But you could kind of see as the game started wearing on, it almost looked like he was getting tired. It almost looks like when he gets tired, he loses some focus, he loses some energy, and as you said, Dan, it looks like he takes plays off. I would be, I said this in my breakdown, but he's lost a lot of weight. But being skinnier just means you're lighter. It doesn't mean you're in better shape. I would wonder about his actual conditioning a little bit and how much of a difference that makes on him when he's at full strength, when he's feeling good, and when he's feeling tired.
Oh, sorry.
I can keep going.
No, I thought Terry had a follow-up on that one. That one's my bad.
My son just poked his head in the door. Sorry.
I think it's a great point.
I really wonder about that. And watching, when I was making the edits of, how things he did wrong, I always kind of check the clock and see where we're at in the quarter. How long has he been in? That kind of, and it was definitely, after an up and down, where he was involved in an offensive play, then a defensive play, then an offensive play. That next defensive play was going to be not quite as sharp. Or, after he's been in for a couple of minutes, he'd been in, on that one play with Dame on that mix-up. That was, you get near the end of the third quarter. He played, I think it was only like 7.5 minutes at that point. But, maybe you need to look into kind of finding what his comfort zone is. I would put a lot of stock into determining when he's at his best, when he's making his errors, how long has he been on the court, and that kind of stuff. Because honestly, I feel like there's something there.
I really wish the NBA would allow wearable technology. I really like having that stuff. Like every other professional league, pretty much outside what I think the only professional leagues in the world that are the top tiers that don't allow wearables that track that information are the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball. I think every other professional league in the world allows it now. The
NBA, the NFL, and MLB are kind of, some of the leaders in these kinds of things. There's a lot of issues about wearable technology.
You look at like the top soccer leagues in the world and the top basketball leagues in the world outside of the NBA, where that tracking data is incredibly valuable. They're all using it. You can see it through underneath all their kits. They're all using wearable, and not to get too sideways, but yeah, I think that would be a really good idea, Brian. I think part of it is energy and whether or not he's tired or not. But I kind of fall back to he may be getting a little bit too comfortable. I think it could be a case of both of those things that are occurring at the same time.
There's a very good chance that's the point too, where he feels a little tired. He's like, okay, I can take a break now.
Yeah,
where if he felt like
I've got 20 points, so I can take a possession or two off.
There's definitely could be an overlap. That's
and maybe with the addition of two more big men into the lineup coming soon, when Meyers and Aminu come back, everyone's going to have, he won't have to play those minutes where he gets tired out, and he'll know that, people are right behind him. They're coming up to take those minutes. There's been a lot of talk about earning minutes as well. Brian, in your experience, is that a thing? How does a coach convey that? How does a coach indicate to somebody that, yes, you've, this is what you need to do to earn the minutes? Do they lay it out there clear as day? Do different coaches take different approaches on that? How does that work, earning minutes?
A lot of that's on the player. If let's say I'm a player and I'm not getting enough minutes, there's only one way to know how to get more minutes, and that's to go to your coach and find out. Some coaches are really good at communicating that, and will have little meetings and will, yell at you at practice and tell you exactly what you want. And some coaches are kind of more quiet and maybe not as personal with that information. But if you're not getting enough minutes, the number one thing you got to do is figure out why. If you're, whether it's sitting down with coach and watching a film, but that has to be communicated. And if it's not, that's definitely on the player to make sure that they understand why they're not playing and what they can do to play more. That's got to be if somebody's not getting enough minutes, that's the number one thing that has to happen.
That's interesting that it's on the player. It's not on the coach to tell somebody. The mind of a competitor is so fascinating, because I am not a competitor, and some of these things which you all take for granted, it's on the player, I look at it from a completely different point of view. So that is totally fascinating to me.
But the coach just has the information that he has, and he makes the best decisions possible, to win the game, of course. But the players, it's they want to play for themselves. They want to be on the court.
Mm-hmm.
Not that the coach is saying, I really wish this guy was on the court more, but I'm not going to play him because of this and this. So he has a lot different viewpoint than the player does. The player wants to be on the court, so they need to figure out what they're going to do to get on the court.
Well, you had a really good point too earlier, Brian, when you talked about not overreacting and not underreacting. And I think that, keeping everything in perspective is so important, especially early on in the season, especially, because we came in with all these expectations about how the Blazers were going to play with this homestand and, with this easy schedule, expectations were very high. I went and looked to see how they compared to last year at this time, 12 games in. So last year, 12 games in, they had a slightly better record. They were 7-5. Their offensive rating was 103.4, which had them at about number 14, so like right in the middle. Their defensive rating was 107.3, so they were way down at number 27 in defensive rating, and their net rating was negative 3.9, so they were 20th in net rating. So that's where they were last year with a negative net rating. This year, 12 games in, they're 6-6, so they're not quite as good of a record. Their offensive rating is real close. It's 104.6, number 15. Their defensive rating is 100.4, which is number 4, and their net rating is a positive 4.1. Again,
if you take the Phoenix game out,
take the Phoenix game out.
It's all about even. Everything's about.
Do you think that the Phoenix game really would move them from if you remove that from a negative net rating, from a positive to a negative net rating?
No, it puts it like at 0.
At 0.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. It puts them right next to 0.
So 0 is a lot better than negative 3.9.
No, it is, and I think that the same thing can be said for last year. I think they had one really bad loss in there too.
They had a couple really bad losses last year.
Well, yeah, throughout the season. I'm just talking early on because they had the.
No, I mean early on. Last year, 12 games in, they'd lost by 10 or more points. They lost by 23. They lost by 31.
There's the big one, 31.
Yeah, and I think 25. Their 12th game was like a 25-point loss.
But yeah,
so they had 3 games where they lost by more than 10, and this year they've had 3 games that were 3 points or less. So I guess it's like a would you rather situation.
Yeah,
would you rather?
So basically, it's the same team that sucks a little bit less.
That's not how I would say it, Dan.
I mean, that's really. I mean, it kind of goes back to the whole thing.
That's one way to say. You could say those words.
It's the most negative way you could possibly put that. I was trying to put that in a more positive way, and I have nothing. That's as negative as it gets.
I mean, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like, there's still like the same issues that were there last season are still here this year. There's just a host of different issues, and the idea that Nurkic was going to.
Wait, you just said that there were the same issues, and then they said there was a host of different issues.
There are, but I'm talking about the same overall issues. So defense, lack of wing depth and wing scoring, bench scoring, those things. They're the not being able to finish in the paint. That's a new one for this year. Last year they were hitting more threes and not in scoring in the paint. This year they're hitting less threes or they're more efficient from 3 and not scoring in the paint. So it's something different on the lower levels. But I'm talking about the overarching issues and the idea that Nurkic was going to. But they played with that pace for those 20 games for Nurkic down the stretch. It's like, yeah, against the easiest schedule in the league, against a bunch of teams that didn't care, and nobody had the team scouted. I mean, you could go down the list of things that were kind of flowing against that. This team is still it's an okay team. It's safe to say it's a good team. It's just fundamentally flawed. The way that this team kind of gets out of this is they have to manage to salvage this, they have to dig out now, because there's no salvaging this in March or February. That's not happening this year, because if things go sideways or more sideways than they are right now, this is like if you're Coach Brian Freeman, if you're player Brian Freeman, you might call for that meeting a little early. Because with the way the schedule comes up here in a month, this is not the thing that you want to be in if you're Portland. So, I don't know. It's kind of a weird, awkward situation that they're in right now, and for me, I think it's going to be an interesting experiment to see how they figure this out, if they figure it out.
Well, looking up at the schedule that they have coming up, to kind of start wrapping things up here a little bit, they do have some games which may or may not be more winnable than others. There's the Nuggets game coming up on Monday. There's Magic coming up on Wednesday.
Both those teams
the Magic
are playing
is a
out of their
team
mind.
that appears to be a lot better this year. Then we have the home and away against the Sacramento Kings, home and away. Then the Grizzlies again. I think
I'm trying to find the game. Where's the game in this that Portland's supposed to start picking up wins easily in?
You don't think they can win the home and home against the Kings?
I mean, the Kings, sure, they've kind of been a thorn in the side of a few teams with the way they've played. Portland's not exactly riding high on confidence right now. I think the Denver game is the big time swing game. If they can get a big win against Denver, that could springboard them. That could really get them going. What are the keys to beating Denver? Nurkic has got to play Nurkic basketball. Like he's got to. CJ McCollum said it in a post-game interview a couple days ago, probably about a week ago now. Nurkic is the guy that can take them to the next level, and that's absolutely true. As great and as phenomenal as Dame and CJ are, there's nobody on this team that bends a team on the defensive end with their offense more than Nurkic. Dame and CJ both have outstanding gravity, but extreme length and quickness can bother them. We've seen that in the past. There's no amount of length that's going to stop Nurkic from rolling down the middle. Like, you have to put bodies on him that are big enough to stop him.
Don't tell that to Antetokounmpo.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're going to rephrase that. There's no amount of length in the world saves Giannis, who is, the actual definition of a Greek god.
So, do you guys think that Nurkic, operating on full offensive power and never really bringing a lot to defense is enough, or does he have to put both of those things and play both of those at a high level to take the Blazers to, where you're saying they could go with him?
Offensively, it's just about him bending the offense or bending the defense. It's not necessarily about him dropping 30. If he's giving you 18 on that side, night in, night out, that's way above bar for what you need.
Right. I mean, I'm not worried about him on offense.
It's his defensive contribution is what allows the other guys to do other things. And Brian probably can back this up a little more. When you've got that wall behind you, and we've seen it before, when you've got that wall behind you that is providing the stability on the pick and rolls, that is providing the stability on the weak side action, that is coming up and hedging when it needs to hedge, sagging back in, shucking cutters, just getting opposing offenses off balance, that does a lot for your defense, especially for a defense that's not all that aggressive to begin with.
Is he doing that, Brian? Do you think he's doing that right now?
I think he is, but as we said earlier, it's not consistent enough.
Okay.
I mean, he is a good defensive player. I would take him as my 5 on if I had to get a stop, I'd have Nurkic in there as my 5 and feel comfortable about it. But it's just doing it possession in and possession out, and always having confidence that he's going to make that communication, he's going to make that extra effort, and that's the big thing. If they can keep him invested and keep him focused, because he has the skills, I think he has the desire. He's smart enough. He's a very intelligent player. It's just making sure that he's focused and ready to go every possession. And if they can do that, I mean, he's going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. And that's those same things that you just kind of hit on, the idea that he needs to stay focused and stay in tune and stay committed. What is that reminiscent of? It's the same kind of thing as we kind of heard out of Denver. And that's why I think people need to kind of keep their eye on this. Again, I don't think it's freak out time about Nurkic, but not only the coaches, but I know this sounds kind of weird, but as a fan base, maybe not elevating him to cult status until he's played at least a full season with the Blazers is probably a good thing. Let him kind of learn and grow. And keep in mind, he's still a young man. I mean, he's still a young dude. He's not a 28-year-old center who's just kind of coming in and giving you the Dwight Howard prima donna act.
That's a great reminder. He's only 23, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's still a kid. So there's still room to grow up.
and the biggest difference between looking at this situation and looking at Denver, he was outwardly pouting. You could see it written on his face. I mean, I think that was a whole nother level than what we're seeing here. Taking some plays off and maybe losing focus every once in a while, I think is something that's going to happen, especially with the
youthful stubbornness.
You just kind of need to, a little bit, and just start developing good habits, and reminding him and give him a little yell, maybe bench him every once in a while, like we're seeing here. But for him, I mean, he really kind of gave the middle finger to Denver a little bit, and I'm not getting any kind of feeling
I think it was too held up high.
Right, exactly.
So, and like I said, I don't think it's reaching anywhere near that level. And my whole thing right now is I don't want the other shoe to drop. I'm not hoping the other shoe drops. I'm just saying it's probably best for everybody to just kind of not overreact to this, but keep an eye on it. Like, this is something that it can get out of control, but it can also easily be reeled in by Coach Stotts and the leaders in that locker room. So I don't think it's, again, a huge issue, but it's something certainly to watch going forward, especially with the next game against the Nuggets being kind of an emotional matchup. He hit on the fact that, in the past that has been I hope they have a nice summer. We got that from him last year. He was really hyped about that. Well, the notes that came out of practice today were, I'm over. I'm past the revenge rivalry stuff. It's like, dude, that was like 2 months ago. How are you past that? And that's where I kind of go. I think that's kind of PR, putting some water on the flames. Like, let's not put any more light on Nurkic right now. Let's just kind of go ahead and let him play basketball. So those are the things I think we need to kind of watch for going forward. Big games coming up, obviously. Denver, this is really awkward and weird to say that Orlando's a big game, but Portland has to. They have to finish these next couple of games. They really need to win 3 out of 4, bare minimum. They need to win the next 4 in my mind to have. To be that's what we talked about, Tara, to start the season, to have that successful start to the season. This isn't unsalvageable by any means. If they win 3 out of 4, 4 out of 4 optimally out of the next 4 games, then I think they have a chance to kind of right the ship early before things get really difficult. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. I want to thank Brian Freeman for stopping by. Brian, go ahead and let them know where they can find you, buddy. You?
Hey, you can find me on Blazers Edge. I just started doing a video breakdown, which I've kind of mentioned today. First one will be coming out here in the next day or so you can check it out there. You can find me on Twitter. My name is Brian Freeman 24.
Yep.
Sure, you can find me on Twitter at TCBBigs, and also just to be sure to check out Blazers Edge. We're adding some new content to the Blazers Edge podcast feed. I think, Dan, you're going to have some new stuff coming up as well. And I just posted the first episode of Women's Hops and Talks, where we're going to elevate the voice of women in basketball. We just posted our first episode, so you should give that a listen as well right after you listen to this one.
Absolutely. I'm Dan Meringue, as always. You can find me on Twitter at DMeringue. As Tara kind of teased there a little bit, there will be a new podcast segment coming out. They're going to be probably about 30 minutes long. Quick, short, and to the point. I know it's hard to believe with me, but they're going to be guest-focused, and we're going to be just kind of taking topics that kind of come up as they go that are focused probably more on the player development, analytics, a little bit deeper dive into stuff that's better for podcast listening than probably consumption. If you guys were getting tired of ever reading my 4,000 word write-ups, this would kind of be the podcast versions of those. But we're going to bring in a lot of national and local writers, podcasters, content creators from all over the country and in the NBA to go ahead and discuss that stuff. Tara, go ahead and take us out of here.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. Brian, thanks for being on the podcast, and we will catch y'all next week.